Vague bids are hard to respond to, especially if trust has been broken. Specificity lowers pressure and increases safety. So it answers the question, what would help right now? We can't assume that people in our lives know what we want or know how to respond. We have to be clear. So instead of, I need you to be there for me, that's a good bid, but it's not clear enough. Maybe try saying specifically, could we sit together for 10 minutes without phones? Welcome to Life and Love by Design. I'm life and relationship coach Odette Coronel. This podcast is for individuals and couples who are done living on autopilot, who are ready to understand the patterns shaping their relationships, their choices, and their sense of self, and redesign them with purpose and intention. Here, we don't just talk about what's hard. We name what's actually happening beneath it and what to do about it. And if you start recognizing yourself or your relationship in these conversations, know that this is the exact work that I do with my private coaching clients, individuals and couples who are ready for real change. Because a meaningful life and connected relationships don't happen by default. They're designed. So let's begin. Welcome to Life and Love by Design. I'm Odette Coronel, and this is the space for people who want to live and love with intention, not by default. Today, we're talking about something that's very simple, but it's actually deeply powerful. We're talking about how connection is built through small moments called bids for connection, and how learning to respond to those bids can change the way you relate to yourself and to others. This episode is especially for you if connection feels a little bit complicated right now. If you've experienced betrayal, rupture, or disappointment, whether it's from infidelity or secrecy or any kind of disloyalty or betrayal, or if you want closeness, but part of you hesitates to reach or respond because it feels too risky. We'll explore what bids for connection actually are, why small moments matter more than grand gestures, how betrayal impacts our ability to reach and respond, and how the 5 A's, which are our core emotional needs, help us understand what we're really looking for underneath every single bid. And this is not about doing connection perfectly. It's about learning how to turn toward yourself first so that connection with others can feel safer, steadier, and more real. And before we go any further, I want to make a gentle reminder. If today's episode resonates with you and you realize that you want deeper support, I offer one-on-one coaching for individuals and couples who want to heal patterns, rebuild trust, and create relationships by design rather than by default. You can learn more by checking out the show notes and booking a complimentary relationship and life alignment audit. So let's begin. I want to start off by pausing and making sure that when we use the word connection, that we're talking about the same thing. Connection is not about constant closeness. It's not about agreement, and it's not about absence of conflict. Connection is a felt experience. It's something that you really know in your body more than in your head. You feel it. And the first marker of connection is feeling seen. This means that someone is actually registering your experience, not just your words, but your tone, your emotions, and your presence. Feeling seen might sound like, I get what this is like for you. Or sometimes just being met with attention and care. The second marker of connection is feeling emotionally met. This is when your inner experience doesn't feel alone. Being emotionally met doesn't mean that someone fixes or agrees with everything that you say. It just means that your feelings are acknowledged and held with respect. And the third marker is feeling safe enough to reach. This one is especially important after betrayal or infidelity or any kind of rupture in the relationship. When connection is present, your nervous system believes, if I reach out for you, I'm not going to be punished. I'm not going to be dismissed. I'm not going to be attacked. And it's really important that you remember that you can't force connection, but you can create the conditions for it. And you do this through small, consistent moments of turning towards. Everything that we're going to be talking about today, bids, responses, the 5 A's. It's about rebuilding these three experiences: being seen, being emotionally met, and feeling safe enough to reach. So, how does this show up in real life? A bid for connection is any attempt to connect emotionally. That's it. It doesn't have to be deep, it doesn't have to be well worded. Bids can be verbal, like, "Can I talk to you?" Or, "I've had a really hard day." And bids can also be nonverbal, like a sigh or sitting closer to someone, or maybe reaching out your hand for someone to hold your hand. Most bids are quiet and they're easy to miss. And that really matters because connection is built in these small moments. Bids are happening all day, every day, with partners, with friends, with coworkers, even with ourselves. And after betrayal, bids can feel heavier. What used to feel like a simple reach can actually feel like a risk. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be rejected. And that's why learning to recognize bids, especially the subtle ones, is such an important skill. When we start noticing bids, we stop missing chances to build connection with other people. And when we respond with care, even in small ways, trust begins to rebuild one moment at a time. This is why bids matter so much, because trust is built through responsiveness, not through promises, not through explanations, but through what happens in ordinary moments. Every time a bid is noticed and responded to, the nervous system learns, I can reach and I'm not going to be left alone. And it's these small moments that create emotional safety. And after betrayal, reaching for connection, it doesn't feel neutral anymore. It actually feels dangerous. What used to be a simple bid now feels like exposure. Whether it's a question or a sigh or a request, it really carries the weight of, will you be there for me this time? Are you going to reject me? Are you going to make fun of me? Are you going to ignore me? That's why rebuilding doesn't happen through grand gestures. It's big apologies or trips or declarations. They might feel meaningful, but they don't teach the nervous system what it needs to learn. Rebuilding happens when small bids are noticed and they're responded to consistently. Dr. John Gottman's research makes this very clear. In happier, more satisfied relationships, partners turn toward bids about 86% of the time. But in distressed or unsatisfied relationships, that number drops to about 33%. So, what this tells us is that disconnection is not usually because there's a lack of love. It's just about this small missed opportunities, these missed moments. And the good news is that those moments are something that we can learn how to notice. We can practice responding to them one small bit at a time. And remember, just because you've been betrayed, that need for connection doesn't go away. But what changes is the way that we reach for it. After betrayal, like I said before, bids start to feel riskier. The nervous system learns if I reach out, I might be hurt. And because of that, the bids start to come out differently. For some people, they come out sharper, more harsh. So they sound more critical, more intense, more urgent. They might sound like contempt or defensiveness or even stonewalling. And this isn't because the person wants conflict, it's because of fear or the pain that's underneath the bid. For some people, bids might become quieter. They'll be very short with their partner and answer shortly, might have a little bit of an attitude, might be less asking and more things like, I'm fine or whatever. And for other people, they might stop bidding altogether, not because they don't want connection, but because it feels safer to just stay quiet than to reach out. If you're doing all the right things, you're showing up, you're holding it together, you're being capable and responsible, and yet something in your life and relationships or your marriage still feels off, then give me a few seconds of your time because this message is for you. Relationships don't usually fall apart because of one big event. More often, it's the small everyday moments when we stop being intentional, or we stop really listening, or we stop choosing connection. Those are the things that create distance over time. I work with thoughtful, high functioning individuals and couples who aren't broken, but they're feeling disconnected or misaligned or just wondering how they got here. In my coaching, we slow things down. We try to understand what's happening beneath the surface. We identify the patterns that are shaping your relationships and your choices, and then we intentionally design what comes next. So if you're listening and you're thinking, this feels like me, that's not an accident. I offer a complimentary relationship and life alignment audit. It's a focused 45-minute conversation where I'm going to help you gain clarity and identify what comes next. You can book your session by visiting odettecoronel.com. I would love to connect with you. So if you recognize yourself in any of these patterns, there's nothing wrong with you. These are just protective strategies. They've helped you survive a rupture in trust. It makes total sense that you're feeling this way. The work now isn't to force yourself to bid differently overnight. It's to slowly rebuild enough safety internally and relationally so that reaching starts to feel possible again, whether it's with the person that betrayed you or with a new romantic partner or simply just with a colleague or a friend or a family member or even a client. And that's why everything that we're talking about today is about learning how to build connection safely, not perfectly. When someone makes a bid for connection, there are only three possible ways to respond. We can either turn toward, we can turn away, or we can turn against. And again, this framework was created by Dr. John Gottman and the Gottman Institute. So turning toward builds connection. Turning away stalls it. It gets in the way of connection. And then turning against erodes connection over time. This isn't about being good or bad. It's about what happens emotionally in the moment. And again, I can't possibly emphasize enough, turning away or against is about protection, not cruelty. When trust has been broken, your nervous system is just quick to defend and protect itself. So let's take a simple example. Imagine someone says, I had a hard day. That's a bid for connection. A turning toward response might be, tell me more. Or maybe just, making eye contact and staying present. Turning away might sound like, that sucks, followed by just, continuing to stroll through your phone, or maybe changing the subject. That's turning away. Turning against might look like, you think that's hard? So these are all bids, but very different responses. And something crucial that I want you to notice is that tone matters just as much as words. It's not just what you say, but how you say it. You can say the right thing with a dismissive tone and still turn away. Or you can say very little with warmth, and that could be an example of turning toward. This work is not about catching every single bid. We're not going to get it right every single time. But it is about increasing awareness and choosing when we can to turn toward more often than not. That is how connection is rebuilt. But before we can consistently turn toward someone else, we need to practice turning toward ourselves. We need to create that emotional safety and connection within ourselves. Connection starts internally. This is what I call a self-bid. It's really just any attempt to check in with yourself emotionally. And it could be as simple as just noticing, I'm tired or I'm anxious. I want to feel safe right now. The first step is noticing your emotions. Just as with a partner's bid, it's noticing, not necessarily fixing. So it just means I see you, I hear you, you exist. And the second step is listening to your body. What's happening in your shoulders, your chest, your stomach? Your body often tells you more than your mind about what you really need. And then the third step is responding with care. What can you offer yourself in the moment that feels safe and soothing? Maybe it's a breath, maybe it's a kind word, or simply just allowing the feeling to be there and just sit with it. When you're practicing self-bids regularly, your nervous system learns that you can be trusted and that you are safe to be with yourself. Only when this internal connection is strengthened can we reach toward others in a way that feels sustainable. So before turning toward a partner or a friend or a colleague, check in with yourself first. Ask yourself, what do I need right now to feel a little safer, a little seen, a little held? This is a foundation for rebuilding connection because you can't reliably offer what you haven't practiced receiving yourself. So, when we talked about bids for connection, it's important to understand this. A bid is rarely about the words that are actually being said. It's really about the emotional need underneath the words. Most of the time, when someone reaches for connection, they're asking for one or more of these five core needs, which author David Richo calls the 5 A's. The first is attention. This is the need to feel seen and present with. And it sounds like, are you here with me? It could be as simple as eye contact, putting the phone down, or just listening without interruption. The second need is affection. This is the need to feel cared about. It's about warmth, gentleness, tone, or safe touch when it's welcome, right? Affection says, you matter to me. The third need is acceptance. This is the need to be allowed to feel what we feel without being corrected or fixed or judged. Acceptance just says, you're allowed to be you even when it's messy. The fourth is appreciation. This is the need to know that our efforts, our presence, our growth are noticed. Appreciation says, I see what you're doing and it counts, it matters. And the fifth is allowing. This is the need for autonomy and growth. So allowing says, you're allowed to change, you have needs, you can make choices. Even after we've been betrayed or there's been some kind of rupture, those needs don't disappear. In fact, they usually become more important and more sensitive. So when a bid becomes awkward or sharp or quiet, instead of asking, what's wrong with this person? We can gently ask ourselves, which of the 5 A's might they be needing right now? And just as importantly, or even more importantly, which one do I need to offer myself first? This is how bids stop feeling like pressure and start becoming pathways to connection. So, what does this look like in everyday life? Remember, a bid is usually asking for one or more of the 5 A's: attention, affection, acceptance, appreciation, or allowing. So, for example, if someone says, I had a really hard day, the underlying need might be attention. They want to be seen, they want to be heard, and possibly affection. They want warmth, they want to be cared for, they want reassurance. Another example might be, can I go out tonight? Maybe your kid asks you this question. On the surface, it's a request for space or choice, but underneath, it's might be about acceptance or acknowledging their autonomy and allowing, supporting their ability to make decisions without judgment. So the power of matching these bids to the 5 A's is that it really helps us see the need behind the behavior rather than reacting to the words alone. When we respond with one or more of the 5 A's, we're meeting the need, even if the words weren't perfectly clear. And again, this is especially important when we've experienced some kind of conflict or rupture, because small, accurate responses are what teach the nervous system that reaching out is safe. So the next time you notice a bid, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, ask yourself, which of the 5 A's is this person asking for? And again, which of these 5 A's can I offer right now? Remember, this is how connection starts to rebuild one moment at a time. So now that we know what bids really are asking for, let's talk about how to make them clearer and safer. The goal here is not to say things perfectly. The goal is to make it easier for connection to actually happen. The first step is to name the need. Instead of leading with frustration or fear, try to name what you're actually needing underneath. For example, instead of, you never call me, you never check in on me, you might say, I miss you and I need reassurance right now. The second step is to be specific. Vague bids are hard to respond to, especially if trust has been broken. Specificity lowers pressure and increases safety. So it answers the question, what would help right now? We can't assume that people in our lives know what we want or know how to respond. We have to be clear. So instead of, I need you to be there for me, that's a that's a good bid, but it's not clear enough. Maybe try saying specifically, could we sit together for 10 minutes without phones? And then the third step is to stop the criticism. This is often the hardest part, especially when there's conflict or betrayal or any kind of pain. Criticism usually means there's a real need underneath, but when it leads the bid, the other person's nervous system just goes into defense mode. By not criticizing, that doesn't mean that your pain is invalid. It doesn't even mean that you're right in the argument, but it just means that you're choosing clarity over self protection. A helpful question to ask yourself: if I weren't afraid of being dismissed, or if I weren't trying to prove that I'm right, what would I ask for right now? Clear, safe bids don't guarantee that you're going to get the response that you want, but they do create the conditions for connection. And that's where rebuilding begins. And I want to slow this part down because this is where a lot of people are really hard on themselves. Most of us weren't taught how to ask for connection directly. We learned how to protect ourselves. So bids often come out as criticism, withdrawal, or silence. Again, not because we're trying to punish people away or push them away, but because we're afraid of being hurt again. So, another example: you never listened to me. On the surface, that sounds like criticism, but underneath, there's usually a real need. When we reframe it as, I need attention right now, we're not changing the truth, we're just changing the entry point. We're naming the need instead of leading with the pain. Another example is silence. Many of us like to give the silent treatment. Silence is often misunderstood as distance or indifference or like the person doesn't care. But very often, silence is a bid that doesn't feel safe enough to use words. When we translate silence into, I feel disconnected and I need reassurance, then we're honoring what's happening internally rather than judging it. This reframing is not about forcing yourself to speak before you're ready. It's about giving yourself a language when you want it. And for those of you who are responding to bids, this is an invitation to get curious instead of defensive. When something lands as sharp or quiet, try asking yourself, what might they be needing right now? Reframing bids is one of the most powerful ways to move from protection to connection without minimizing the pain that got you there. And one of the biggest fears after betrayal or during conflict is, what if I say the wrong thing and it makes things worse? So I want to be very clear. Connection doesn't require perfection. It is a risk, but it does require willingness. When someone makes a bid, your response doesn't have to fix anything. It just has to let the other person know, I see you. So, like I mentioned before, the three basic responses that Dr. John Gottman talks about are turning toward, turning away, or turning against. And I want to really focus on turning toward as a simple structure to help you build that connection when someone is making a bid to you. The first step is reflect. This means putting words into what you're hearing. Again, this is when you are trying to respond to a bid that you're receiving from your partner or your friend or anyone else that you're in relationship with. So you reflect. For example, I hear that you're feeling disconnected. The second step is to validate. Validation is not agreement, it's just understanding. So it might sound like, that makes sense, especially after everything that we've been through. And then the third step is respond. This is where you offer what you can without overpromising or self-abandoning. For example, you can respond, I can sit with you for 10 minutes now, or we can plan a time later. What would feel better? Right? It doesn't mean that you have to say yes all the time. Turning toward just means that you do need to respond and help them feel validated. Even if you say no, I can't right now, it's about how you say it, it's about the tone. And if the answer is no or not right now, that doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that you're practicing honesty, which is part of safety. Again, turning toward isn't about getting it right. It's about staying emotionally available. And when repair is needed, and it always is at times, Repair counts more than perfection. So now let's move from theory into practice. Remember, the goal here isn't perfection. It's awareness, curiosity, and small steps toward connection. Let's start with making the bids. First, think about a bid that you can make with yourself. It might be, I need a moment of calm, or I need to check in with how I'm feeling right now. Then ask yourself, which of the 5 A's, attention, affection, acceptance, appreciation, or allowing, am I asking for in this moment? Next, think of a bid that you can make with someone else. See if you can keep it simple, safe, specific. Can we sit together for 5 minutes? Or I can really, use your ear right now. Or I really need to talk to someone right now. Do you have a few minutes? Again, check in. Which of the 5 A's am I asking for? Now practice responding to bids. You don't need to guess what the other person is feeling perfectly. This is about noticing and responding in ways that feel safe and caring. Ask yourself, can I notice when someone offers me a bid? What is the need behind it? Which of the 5 A's might they be asking for? How can I turn toward them, even in a small, manageable way? This is the essence of rebuilding connection. Small, clear bids, and then responses that are attentive and available. So this week, I'm going to ask you to practice making small bids with others, making small bids with yourself, and also practice responding to bids and also noticing what is the need behind other bids. And as we close, I want to leave you with this reminder. Connection isn't built by saying the perfect thing. It's built by responding in ways that feel honest and available. And if you've noticed yourself softening at this point in the episode, that matters. If something felt challenging or tender, that's important to notice too. Rebuilding connection is not about pushing yourself to trust again. It's about learning how to turn toward instead of away, starting with yourself. So if you're listening and realizing you want support practicing this, you don't have to do it alone. This is the work that I do with individuals and couples who want to rebuild trust, safety, and connection in a way that feels aligned and sustainable. Again, you can find ways to work with me by checking out the show notes or just visit my website, odettecoronel.com. And if this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who's navigating their own path back to connection. So until next time, remember, you get to design your life and you get to design how you love. If today's episode described you or your relationship, then this is your moment. You don't need more information. You need a new way of living, choosing, and relating. And that's the work I do with individuals and couples. If you're ready to stop repeating the same patterns and start designing your life and relationships intentionally, visit the link in the show notes and book a complimentary relationship and life audit. Remember, your life and your love are yours to design.